The car door slammed shut, and the sound echoed through the empty parking lot like the sound of my heart breaking. Cold air rushed in, stinging my cheeks as my son, Daniel, sat behind the steering wheel, his hands gripping it so tightly that his knuckles turned white. I could see the veins bulging on the back of his hands, the same hands that once held mine when he was little, afraid to cross the street. "Mom, I can't take you any more," he said finally, his voice cracking under the weight of his own words. "You don't understand me, you never do." My chest tightened. I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. "Daniel, what are you talking about? I just asked you where we're going. You didn't tell me." He laughed, but it wasn't out of humor. It was that sharp, bitter sound I'd come to recognize over the past few months, the one that told me my son was no longer my boy, but a man full of resentment. "You see, that's exactly it," he snapped. "You question everything I do, like I'm still a child. I'm 30 years old, Mom. You can't keep controlling me." I felt my throat tighten. "I wasn't controlling you," I whispered. "I was just worried. You said we were going to talk, Daniel. You thought what?" He turned toward me now, his eyes flashing with anger. "You thought you could guilt trip me again, make me feel bad for not living the way you want." I swallowed hard, my hands trembling in my lap. "I never wanted to make you feel bad, sweetheart. I just—" He cut me off with a frustrated sigh and slammed his hands on the steering wheel. "You always do this. You make everything about you. I tell you about my problems, and somehow you twist them into stories about how you suffered more. You talk about Dad leaving like it's my fault, like I was supposed to fix everything when I was a kid. I'm tired, Mom. I'm tired of being your emotional punching bag." His words hit harder than a slap. I felt the sting deep in my chest, where all the unspoken words had been gathering for years. "Daniel," I said softly, "I never blamed you for what your father did. I was just lonely. You were all I had." He looked away, eyes glassy, but his voice stayed firm. "And you made sure I knew that, every single day." The silence that followed was unbearable. Cars passed by on the distant road, their headlights sweeping over us like brief, cold flashes of judgment. I wanted to reach for him, to touch his arm like I used to when he was upset, but something in his posture stopped me. He was rigid, distant. "Daniel," I said again, voice trembling, "I didn't mean to make you feel trapped. I thought I was helping." He exhaled shakily. "You were helping yourself, Mom. You needed someone to listen, someone to lean on, and I tried. I really tried, but now I can't do it anymore." I stared at him, tears beginning to blur my vision. "Where am I supposed to go?" He looked at me for a long moment. A flash of guilt crossed his face, but he quickly pushed it away. "I don't know. You'll figure it out. You always do." And then, before I could say another word, he reached over, unlocked the door, and said quietly, "Get out." I froze. My heart pounded. Surely he didn't mean it. "Daniel, please. It's dark. I don't have my purse. I don't even—" He shook his head. "Mom, I need space. I need it. You don't understand how heavy it's been. But you're my son," I whispered, my voice breaking. He didn't answer. The moment stretched on unbearable, thick with all the years we'd misunderstood each other. Finally, I opened the door. My legs trembled as I stepped out onto the cracked asphalt. The night air was biting cold, the faint smell of rain still lingering from earlier. "Daniel," I said one last time, gripping the edge of the car door, "don't leave me like this, please." He didn't look at me. His face was turned forward, staring at the empty road ahead, and then he drove away. The sound of the engine faded slowly, leaving me standing there in the dark, surrounded by the soft hum of distant streetlights and the echo of my own breathing. I stood motionless, unable to process what had just happened. My son, the boy who once cried when I let go of his hand at kindergarten, the teenager who used to tell me his dreams of becoming a musician, the man who once promised to take care of me when I got old, had just abandoned me on the side of the road. For a few moments I simply stood there, numb. The world felt too big, too quiet. I looked around. We were in the parking lot of a closed gas station, the fluorescent sign flickering faintly overhead. My coat wasn't warm enough, and my shoes the same old flats I wore for errands soaked through from the damp pavement. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold on to something warmth, memory, maybe reason. How did we get here? It hadn't always been this way. When Daniel was a boy, we were inseparable. After his father left us when he was 8, I worked double shifts to make sure he never went without. Every night I'd come home exhausted, but I'd still read him a story before bed. He'd curl up next to me, his small hand clutching mine, and whisper, "Don't worry, Mom. When I grow up, I'll take care of you." I had believed him. Somewhere along the way, though, life had changed. The older he got, the more distant he became. After college, he started his own business, moved to another city, and barely called. When I fell and broke my hip last year, he came to visit reluctantly. He said he'd help, but after a few months, I could tell he wanted to leave. I thought this trip today would be a chance to reconnect. He said he'd drive me to the countryside, to the old lake where we used to go when he was little. I had packed sandwiches and his favorite cookies, thinking we'd talk and maybe laugh again like before. Instead, it ended with him telling me he couldn't take me anymore. The wind howled softly, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and distant rain. My body shivered, but it wasn't just from the cold. It was from the emptiness gnawing inside. I took a shaky step forward, my eyes searching the dimly lit horizon for any sign of life. Nothing. Just the endless stretch of asphalt and the hum of faraway traffic. My hands were trembling not just from the cold, but from the realization that I had no money, no phone, no way to call for help. My purse had been left in the back seat. Daniel had driven off so fast that I hadn't even had time to grab it. Tears welled in my eyes as I tried to steady my breathing. "Don't cry," I whispered to myself. "You've survived worse." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. I turned toward the faint light of a roadside diner about half a mile away. My knees ached with every step, but I forced myself forward. The pavement was uneven, and once I nearly tripped. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of the distance, but because of the pain in my heart. I thought of the day he was born, how small he was in my arms, how his tiny fingers had wrapped around mine as if to say, "Don't ever let go." And now, decades later, he was the one who had let go. By the time I reached the edge of the diner's parking lot, the lights flickered above the glass doors, and I saw a figure standing near the entrance tall, with a long coat, holding something in his hands. I couldn't see his face clearly, but as he turned toward me, I noticed the concern in his eyes. He stepped forward, his voice low and steady. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I opened my mouth to answer, but my voice came out cracked and hoarse. My son left me." The man frowned, glancing toward the dark road behind me. "Left you here." I nodded, a single tear escaping down my cheek. He hesitated, then gently placed his coat around my shoulders. "Come inside. It's too cold out here." As he guided me toward the warm glow of the diner, I didn't know who he was or why he cared, but for the first time in what felt like years, someone's kindness reached me. And deep down, I had no idea that this stranger was about to change everything that came after that night. The warmth of the diner felt almost unreal after the biting cold outside. The door chimed softly as we stepped in, and the smell of fresh coffee, grilled bacon, and something sweet filled the air. My hands were shaking as I held onto the man's arm for balance, my legs numb from both shock and the long walk. "Take a seat," he said quietly, guiding me to a booth near the back. The leather seat creaked as I sat down. "I'll get you some tea." I nodded wordlessly. My throat was tight. I couldn't have spoken even if I wanted to. He walked toward the counter, spoke briefly with the waitress, a young woman with kind eyes, and returned with a steaming mug and a gentle smile. "Drink this. You're freezing." I wrapped my fingers around the cup, the heat seeping into my skin. "Thank you," I murmured. My voice sounded weak, far away. He sat across from me, studying me quietly for a moment before speaking. "You said your son left you out there." I looked down at the tea, unable to meet his eyes. "Yes, he He said he couldn't take me anymore. His eyebrows knit together, and he just drove away. I nodded without my purse, without a word. I forced a small, bitter laugh. Can you believe that, after everything I've done for him? The man's expression softened. Some people lose sight of what matters, he said gently. It doesn't make it right, but it happens. I looked up then, really seeing him for the first time. He was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, with dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. His coat, now draped over my shoulders, smelled faintly of rain and cedar. There was something kind in his eyes, something steady. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, embarrassed by my tears. "You must think I'm pathetic." He shook his head. "No, I think you've had a hard night." Something in his voice, the calm certainty of it, made the tears I'd been holding back finally spill over. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to hide the sob that escaped me. "I don't understand what I did wrong," I whispered. "I raised him alone. I worked every day for years. I gave up everything, my friends, my dreams, just so he could have a good life. And now he just throws me away like I'm nothing." The man didn't interrupt. He didn't offer clichés or empty comfort. He simply waited until I caught my breath again. When I finally looked up, he said softly, "You didn't do anything wrong by loving him. But sometimes love makes people forget where they end and someone else begins. Maybe your son doesn't know how to separate care from control. Maybe he's still figuring it out." I blinked at him. "You sound like you know something about that." He smiled faintly, almost sadly. "I used to be your son." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He leaned back, eyes drifting to the window where rain had begun to fall again. "My mother and we had a rough relationship. After my father died, she leaned on me for everything. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was strong enough. But after years of carrying both our pain, I snapped. I said terrible things. I walked away." My heart clenched. "Did you ever go back?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but it was too late. She'd passed away by the time I found the courage." I inhaled sharply, the ache in his voice piercing straight through me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "So am I," he said quietly. "That's why, when I saw you out there tonight, I couldn't just drive by. You looked like her, standing there lost, proud, hurt, still trying to be strong." The silence between us was gentle now, filled not with pity but understanding. I stared into my tea, watching the faint ripples tremble across the surface. "I used to think being a mother meant never letting go." I said softly, "that if I kept him close, I could protect him from everything: pain, failure, heartbreak. But maybe I just made him feel trapped." The man smiled kindly. "You loved him the only way you knew how. That's what mothers do." I sighed, wiping at my eyes. "He used to be such a good boy, so gentle. I remember once when he was 10, I fell asleep on the couch after a night shift. When I woke up, he'd covered me with his blanket and left a note that said, 'I'll take care of you one day, Mom.'" My voice cracked and the tears returned, softer this time. He kept that promise for a while. After my surgery last year, he moved me into his apartment, took care of everything: bills, groceries, medication. But I could tell it was wearing on him. I didn't mean to make him feel burdened, but maybe I did. I just didn't want to be alone. He nodded slowly. "Sometimes love turns into fear, fear of losing someone, fear of being left behind. It happens to all of us. But tonight doesn't have to be the end of your story. Maybe it's just a pause." I let his words sink in. The waitress came by with a slice of pie and a gentle smile. "On the house," she said softly. "You look like you could use something sweet." I smiled faintly and thanked her. The warmth of the pie, the kindness of strangers, it all felt surreal. After a long pause, I looked at the man again. "What's your name?" "Michael," he said. "And you?" "Evelyn." "Well, Evelyn," he said, "I'm heading into town. There's a small motel near the edge of Maple Street. I can drive you there. You can rest, call someone in the morning, figure things out." I hesitated. "You've already done so much. I couldn't ask." He shook his head gently. "You're not asking. I'm offering." Something about the calm sincerity in his eyes made me trust him. Maybe it was foolish, but that night I was too tired to question kindness. The drive to the motel was quiet but peaceful. The rain tapped softly against the windows, and the rhythmic sound of the wipers was oddly soothing. I stared out at the blurred lights of the sleeping town, feeling the first flicker of calm I'd had all night. When we arrived, Michael parked the car and walked me to the front desk. He paid for the room before I could protest. "You can pay me back later," he said when I opened my mouth to object, "or not at all. Just promise me you'll rest." I smiled weakly. "You remind me of someone my son could have been, if things had gone differently." He gave a small nod. "Maybe one day he'll realize what he's done. People usually do eventually." Inside the room, I sat on the edge of the bed after he left, listening to the rain outside. For the first time in a long while, I let myself breathe, really breathe. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains. My phone and purse were still gone, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't as angry anymore, just sad, yes, but also strangely free. I went to the motel office and borrowed a phone. My hands shook as I dialed Daniel's number, unsure if he'd even pick up. After a few rings, his voice came through groggy, hesitant. "Hello, Daniel," I said softly. There was a pause. "Mom, yes, it's me." Another long silence. I could almost hear the guilt in his breathing. "Where are you?" He finally asked, voice low. "At a motel. A kind man helped me last night. I'm safe." He exhaled, relief audible. "Mom, he stopped, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was angry and I wasn't thinking." I closed my eyes. "I know. You've been carrying too much for too long. I didn't make it easy for you." "No," he said quickly. "It's not your fault. You did everything for me. I was selfish. I thought pushing you away would make it easier. But when I got home last night and saw your things in the back seat, I realized what I'd done." Tears rolled down my cheeks silently. "I'm coming to get you," he said. "Please just stay there." I hesitated, then whispered, "Okay." 2 hours later, I saw his car pull into the parking lot. When he stepped out, his face was pale, his eyes red from crying. Without a word, he ran to me and wrapped his arms around me tightly, just like when he was little. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said again, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "I was stupid. I didn't mean any of it." I held him, stroking his back gently. "It's all right," I said softly. "We both said things we didn't mean, but maybe now we can start over." He nodded against my shoulder, tears soaking through my coat. When we finally pulled apart, I looked at him, really looked, and saw not the angry man from last night, but my son again. "Do you want to get some breakfast?" he asked, his voice trembling with a shy, hopeful smile. I smiled back. "I'd like that." As we walked toward the car, I turned for a moment, half expecting to see Michael standing somewhere nearby. But the parking lot was empty, only the faint sunlight glimmering on wet pavement. Maybe he was gone, or maybe he'd just come into my life for that one night to remind me that even in the darkest moments, kindness still exists. And as Daniel opened the car door for me, this time gently, with care I realized something else. Sometimes people need to be lost for a little while to find their way back. And sometimes love doesn't end when it's broken. It begins again, softer, wiser, and stronger than before.